Do you know that what happened to me, this is the story of life. I went to the bank because I needed, this is in San Miguel, and I said, could you please give me 15,000 pesos, just $1,500. They say, we want to, but you don't have it. And I came home, and I was painting, and I saw this Federal Express envelope, and I have tons of them, but this one hadn't been opened. I opened it up, and there was a $5,000 check in it that I'd forgotten about. All of a sudden, I was saved, like in a day, in a second. Story of my life. Unlike practically everybody in the world, my life has been 100% homogeneous with being creative. The point with me is, and with many other artists as well, the creative pool, the creative resource is infinite, and the waters and energy from that resource can flow and be utilized in many different mediums. It's actually not being multi-talented. That's stupid. It's just a very deep creative reservoir that can be, like oil, can be used to fuel many different mediums. But why I am different from Leonardo da Vinci, and I'm not saying comparable, but I have one ace in the hand that he did not. He was not an athlete. He was not a world-class athlete, nor was he an Olympic medalist.
The very first time I saw him skate was at Lakeshore Lions Arena, and they had Jay Humphreys and David McGilvery and some of the top male skaters of the time that were so clean cut and just very 1960s in appeal, and out came this free spirit from Montreal who nobody had ever seen before, who was dressed differently than anybody else on the ice, and who was moving his body and putting his body in positions that no male skater had ever done before.
In his day, I mean, he was, in my mind, a phenomenon. And I guess I was, being young, in awe basically of what he was doing on the ice. He knows how to put people onto a trip. It's always an experience that you don't forget.
The passion, the emotion, being able to take raw emotion and now give it a form on the ice. You'd watch that and just know, okay, that's what pain feels like, that's what love feels like, that's what angst feels like. He was able to put form to it. It didn't matter if it was 6 in the morning or whether it was an Olympic performance. Every day he seemed to give that same kind of passion, that same kind of drive and intensity every time he skated.
We were artists experimenting within that medium, but there was no ideological direction we were going in. We were just artists expressing ourselves. We did not believe that movement was masculine or feminine. But other people in the world, Russians, English, Americans, especially Americans, would have at that time thought that if a man raised his arm, that was feminine, but if it was below the shoulder, it was masculine.
They didn't know what to do with him. He had broken through the mold. He was still doing all the technical tricks that every other guy was doing, but he was doing them with such flair and panache, and doing it from a place that was rooted in history and in art and in culture that skaters had never been, exposed to.
Certainly with the establishment within skating, and let's face it, the establishment with skating, by and large, are people that were non-skaters, people that judged were losers, basically, people that never made it. And those people would not have been enlightened.
Skating, from the time that I knew him, was never a peaceful thing. It was always a stress to perform. A couple times I even saw him canceling shows just because the stress level was too high. Where painting, he could get up easily early in the morning, you know, drink a dozen cups of coffee, and just go at it for hours.
I would go over to his house, and if he wasn't out practicing at the rink, it seemed he'd be there with, you know, paint under his fingernails, wearing some old paint-splattered chinos and a sweatshirt, you know, doing his thing, you know, dragging his hand through his hair as he always did, you know, just being inspired and gleaning inspiration from just, you know, everything around him. An artist, truly an artist through and through. Like, you know, it just saturated every, you know, fiber of his being, that artistry and that desire to, you know, to express something, you know, deeper and something larger than life.
I always admired him for his discipline, skating and painting. Like, he would paint 5 hours a day plus 6 hours skating. I went many times with him to the skating ring, and he would swirl around, and how was this and how was that. I admired him, I really did. To me, he was the snow prince.
I was introduced to Toller by Robert Desrosiers. I think Toller must have felt that he could play with me, you know, that we could explore that visual camera angle. I understood and digged his kind of directions. He directed some of my photo shoots. He was like an incredible performer, and I could not stop shooting him. I think I must have shot 15 rolls of film, you know, bang, 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 because Toller is truly a dancer. And his spirit and his beauty is in his body, it's like in every muscle. And he has such an understanding of presenting and bring that out in performing. He gave me a lot to work with.
He was such a celebrity. Everywhere I went with him, you know, people would want to talk to him and come up to him, and he was constantly, you know, sort of having to fend off people because everyone wanted a little piece of him. It really felt like I was with some kind of a rock star. And the way he dressed, I mean, he had such a fantastic sense of style, a sense of fashion, really, truly sense of himself. And he would go walking, you know, down Carlton Street with his two beautiful English setters, Lapis and Minkus, and he was just a vision. And it was something that I think everyone, you know, in Toronto was so starved for. Still, all these years later, still I think we're starved for that. These people that are larger than life, these glorious, colorful characters. I mean, Canadians aren't known for their theatrical qualities oftentimes, and certainly they're not known for dressing, you know, to the max and being that over the top. But Toller was all those things, just a great character.
He was influenced, loved music, loved to dance, loved to go partying. And I say when he went partying, we would always go to, this would be after performances or whatever. He would always arrive in the limo and would like to make an arrival or make an entrance.
Caller Cranston, ladies and gentlemen.
I have moved ahead. I am no longer that person. And as I do this interview, I can't stand the thought that a camera is on my 57-year-old face. And it would be most unlikely that if this documentary comes to be, that I will ever see it. Not because I don't respect what the director is doing, but I don't want to see myself. I'm uncomfortable. And I don't lust and hunger to be a star. I don't want that. I'm uncomfortable with that, and it isn't me anymore. People that come in the door never buy. It's the people that are invited to come in the door. Art really depends on where it's shown. I mean, if something's in the Louvre, even me, you probably would think it would be pretty good. If something's in an environment that is absolutely, you know, like some dive, some diner or something, it doesn't have the same impact. If one were to drag a Leonardo da Vinci out onto Queen Street East, out on the pavement, out on the street. Hi, come on in. You'd think it was a piece of shit.
The importance of the show for me at this point is huge. It allowed me to open a gallery in a developing area of Toronto with a major international artist who has a following, who has a track record, and whose work is at the pinnacle of his creative process. Part of the fun with working with Toller is that his mind is as detailed and as elaborate as the detail in his paintings, if not more so. So you never know who's going to be there with you that day and what's going to come out, but that's what part of the journey is, and I think that's the fun of it.
It could be a little bit this way, but let's just leave it.
Yeah, and they can
and then
fine-tune it.
Yeah, no, we can move it over.
Yeah.
What I really enjoyed about the hanging process is that he didn't care if it was a quarter of an inch off. He was fine about that, whereas other artists are very specific, and especially when you're hanging small pictures and you're hanging them in a group, you have to get them exactly right. And I don't use a tape measure, I do it by eye, and so sometimes you make more than one hole. And he literally went up to the wall and went,
there. An artist is never really aware of what period you're in because you're simply doing it. It takes years, but then what we have and what other people don't have is that your work freezes and records your life in a visual. I mean, you literally can go back to, well, in January 1999, this is what I did, and this is where I was. Toothaches and weather, once they're over, you forget them. But the painting actually freezes the moment in a way that skating certainly never did. Like live performing doesn't do that. You're only as good as your last performance. I become so absolutely terrified at Canadian customs, I start shaking.
I do too, I don't like it at all.
No,
I don't mind Canadian, I hate the American customs.
Well, I mean, that's even worse. But I mean, I find that I don't even know if I should lie to my own advantage or tell the truth. And like he said to me, how long have you lived in Mexico? And I'm thinking, should I tell the truth or should I lie? 17 years ago, I basically divested myself of all my objects in Toronto at the age of 40 at a huge auction sale at Waddington's and came to San Miguel. I didn't know anything about Mexico, and I somehow fell in love, like everybody else, with San Miguel, and then thought that I would live here.
Sometimes Canadians like it when Canadian artists go away. I think that has to do with our colonial heritage. We always perceive the center as being elsewhere. It's never us. And it doesn't surprise me that he chooses to live outside of the country so much.
I am forever being dazzled by what Mexico offers in every way, visually, culturally, architecturally, horticulturally, everything. The biggest influence, which is absolutely an appendage, almost like another arm of my life, my existence, my being here, is this garden in which I live. The garden wields a huge influence in every conceivable way. One sees color combinations that you would never see in, say, normal life, but yet the discovery of color in nature has a huge influence on the colors you choose for paintings. Irregular shape is something which is very important to me and is always found in my images. The proper